Lights, camera, action.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be talking about Hunting Matthew Nichols. So this movie essentially is about a guy and his friend that go missing on Halloween night on Vancouver Island. And essentially it's his sister coming, and he's been missing for like 21, 22 years. And it's his sister coming back with this documentary crew to try to make a documentary to figure out what happened to him and to see if she can actually find him. This was a movie that was not on my radar at all. I had no idea what this movie was. I think I saw like a poster for it like a week or two ago, and then I ended up seeing like a little teaser trailer for it, and that's it. So I was kind of like, oh, that's cool. It's one of those mockumentary style movies, and I was like, I really enjoy those. So this is one that really, intrigued my interest that I wanted to check out. So I thought for sure maybe it was going to be in the same vein as like Strange Harvest last year, which I cannot recommend that movie enough. If you have not seen Strange Harvest, please go watch that movie. I'm just a huge sucker for found footage movies because there's just a lot of bad in there, don't get me wrong, but every once in a while you will find like a diamond in the rough of movies of found footage, and I really enjoy them. I have a lot of fun with them. So this along mixed with like that crime mockumentary style, like I said, it was just right up my alley. So I wanted to go check it out. So starting off with some of the positives I really enjoyed about this movie is right off the bat, I think the premise is very intriguing. I think this whole concept of somebody just disappearing with a friend in the middle of the woods on a Halloween night is a very intriguing premise. The fact that, he's been missing for 22 years, and even with everything that, the investigation and everything, they've just found nothing. It's just one of those things to where it keeps asking more questions before you get any answers, so it just makes you more intrigued and more kind of pulled into the story. So I was on board really for this movie because, like I said, the story was just so intriguing. I think the acting across the board is really good. Essentially we just have three main characters. You have the camera guy, our director, and our girl that is playing the sister. Miranda McDougal, I think is her name. But she does a really good job of playing like this really just torn sister. Like, she wants to find out answers, and she will go through hell if she has to try to get the answers that she needs. And she does a great job of portraying all that. There's certain scenes where she has to be really sad, and then in later parts where she has to be really frustrated and irritated with what's going on when it comes to the investigation. There is also scenes where her mental health comes into play that she really does a great job of portraying that and like what's going on with her. And like I said, all the characters are believable. Like all of them are there. You can tell that it's almost like a passion project to get this film made because they are just as curious as the audience is to figure out what is going on. So they all do a really great, believable job. And I think really, honestly, the three of them have really good chemistry together. I think you really buy in that they're this, collaborative team trying to work on this to get this thing done. So I thought overall across the board, I thought the acting was really good. I think the whole aspect of, this mockumentary style of the characters that they do get to interview, which is not a lot, which is something I'll get into in my mixed segment, but they don't really, the ones that we do see that are interviewed in that mockumentary style, I even think they do a really great job of acting. Like, you have one that's obviously the lead investigator. You have, her mom that she interviews at one point. So I think they do a really good job of making you feel like you're actually watching one of those programs or one of those shows, and really makes you forget that you're kind of watching a movie every once in a while. So I think that is really cool. Just wish that kind of immersion kind of stayed there. And it's something, again, that I'll get into in my mixed segment. But for the most part, they did a really good job with that. One of the things I also really like about this movie is that it introduces kind of like this folklore in a way where, it's like, how every town has some kind of urban legend or, some kind of story about something that could be out there. This one has that too, with a pretty interesting, I think it's a pretty interesting thing that they have for this town. And of course, everybody plays it off as, it's not real, it's just, an urban legend or whatever. But I think it's actually pretty intriguing for this story and for the movie. And it's something really that I was not expecting for this kind of movie. I honestly didn't think where it was going to go. I mean, I had an idea of what I thought my interpretation of what was, what was happening or, any of that. But none of that turned out to be true. So it went in this direction with that, urban legend folklore type thing that I thought was really cool. I thought it added an extra thing to the movie to where it almost kind of gave it a new life in a sense to where like, okay, I was like, now with that being introduced, now I'm more curious of where this is going to go. So I really like that. I also really like that small town setting. I just like that whole thing about these mockumentaries or anything, even movies, they have these like small town settings that have like a urban legend or something like that. I just think that adds an extra creep factor to it. And sometimes the town itself can become almost like a character in the movie. And I think, this movie, this town is built up of being so, community driven and stuff like that, to where, when these kids go missing, things start to kind of, swirl about what's going on. And I'm not trying to give anything away. So it does a really great job of kind of building stuff about this town as well, that I think is also this intriguing mystery that I really enjoyed. But I think the overall feel and vibe of the movie is really well done in the sense that they're going for this crime documentary with this, whole thing about how the town is just torn and how they, didn't know what happened either, but they like, it's something we see in a lot of, real crime, shows and whatnot. So I think they really nailed that. So really good job. Now, for a lot of the stuff that I am mixed and or negative on, it could be more of a nitpick thing than anything, but it's just me. I think this movie is more of a slow-paced movie, and there's nothing wrong with that. I really love slow-paced movies because especially if the story's really good. But I feel like there was so much in this movie that was stretched out. Like, I just don't feel like it could have been a feature-length movie. Now, there is some stuff I feel that you could have changed and or rewritten in a way to kind of keep the mystery going a little bit more, to where you could have had more of like an hour and a half runtime for a feature-length movie. But for the most part, I feel like there's a lot of stuff in here that is really stretched out. So, but that's just me. So it kind of kills the pace a little bit. And there is something, I feel like it kind of tips its hat too early to something that goes on to where, to me, that's what should have led into the third act. There is like a scene, not early on, but a pretty good length into the movie, to where they come to find out that there is a particular tape that is missing from evidence. So they have to go through this whole rigmarole of getting that tape back. And once they get that tape and they watch it and they discover a lot of stuff that, happens, there's of course the whole debate among the team if that was real, if it was fake, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like that kind of tipped its hat a little early, because there's still a pretty good chunk after that I feel like that right there would have kind of just led perfectly into our third act. And, I mean, obviously, they could have done some stuff here and there to really build it a little bit more. But I feel like most of the stuff that comes after that is just kind of fluffed out to kind of give it that hour and a half runtime. But I feel like if they wanted to, they could have went back in there and rewrote and changed some stuff around to kind of make it more, even flow throughout to get us to that point. But that was one big thing for me that I noticed. And with that being said, a lot of the back and forth that it does, I feel like it loses a lot of steam throughout the way. Like, you're set up with this intriguing story and you interview these people, but then there are parts where, it's more behind the scenes stuff than it is more a mockumentary. So, like, all of the interviews that are conducted, they're kind of, early on in the movie. And then after that, everything else is really behind the scenes of them going through the evidence, going through these tapes, trying to find any shred that they can find that's something maybe they missed or whatever. And that while that is interesting, you can only do so much of that before you eventually run out of stuff. So it's a lot of that, and them finding stuff, then going back and confronting people, or like the detective that they interviewed earlier on that leads to other stuff. And it's like I said, there's a lot of just stretched out stuff throughout the movie. And like I said, that just kind of kills the pacing a little bit, because like I said, there's only so much of that you can do. But so that's where I'm really kind of mixed on that. And while I do find the story really intriguing and I really enjoy it, I kind of just wish the script maybe went through one or two more drafts, just to kind of be like, hammer some stuff out to where you're like, okay, maybe we don't need this, or let's rewrite this so it flows better into this. But I get it. Like I said, they're trying to make a feature-length film, so I got to give them props for that. I just wish they went about it, or they did the script just a little bit differently. Because I will admit, for the most part, there's not a lot that happens. Like, it's one of those movies that people get mad as shit where nothing happens throughout the entire movie. This is one of those movies. While, yes, the story is intriguing enough, and it should be intriguing enough, it's not intriguing all the way until the end. Like I said, there's a huge lull in the second part of the movie that you're kind of like, okay, I get what you're going for, I get what you're trying to do, but we need to get to something that's going to happen, or you're going to lose the audience. And this is one of those movies. I know people argue all the time about how, like, stuff with Paranormal Activity, how they're like, oh, it builds and builds and builds, in the last like 10 minutes finally something happens. This is essentially that movie. Like, it's a lot of stuff that builds throughout the entire movie, and finally the last 10 to 15 minutes stuff goes off the rails, and that's where all your horror and tension and that's where all that stuff is in that moment. And like I said, I know a lot of people, for example, like Undertone that just came out earlier this year, people were mad that it didn't show anything, but at least that one had the sound design and had all these creepy shots building up to stuff and whatnot. And I know even still that didn't work for that movie. I personally love that movie. Please go check out that review that I did. But at least that movie actually had that kind of stuff going for it, to where this movie, you're just supposed to follow these filmmakers. And there's no point in the movie that it builds any tension or any scares, like I said, up until the final 15 minutes. But I have to admit, those final 15 minutes or so are actually genuinely creepy. Like, there is some really creepy stuff, and it's something we've seen 100 times before, but it kind of, again, tips its hat to, there's a certain movie that the missing kid really loves, and it's referenced throughout the movie. So by midway through or whatever, when that's kind of mentioned, you're kind of like, okay, is it going to kind of be a homage to that? And it kind of is in its own way, but it does enough to where it stands out on its own, which I really appreciated. But obviously, it's stuff that we've seen before, but I think it's done in a pretty good way. Like I said, if you have the patience to get through this, to get through to the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie, it does pay off, but I just wish there was more in that second act to really springboard it forward to where we could have got, really, I just wish it built more tension and stuff in the middle to get us to that final act, if that makes sense. I just wish they could have done more with the story and that intriguing element of it to keep that momentum going all the way until that third act. Because if they would have had where that story would have just been that interesting, and they would have found all this just crazy evidence and stuff leading all the way up until that third act, I think it would have been a better payoff, because you at least would have had something there to be like, this is crazy, to kind of get you there. But when you kind of get lost in the second act, you're kind of like, okay. So when it gets to that third act, even though, like I said, the third act is genuinely creepy, you just really got to have the patience to kind of get there. But like I said, it's one of those things that I kind of wish that they did some stuff differently and change some stuff and whatnot. But for the most part, I thought this movie was all right. I just wish there was a little bit more suspense, a little bit more tension throughout the movie, a little bit more. They kept that interest of that story going throughout, and I just, it's something I just wish they held on to. But unfortunately, they didn't. But for the most part, the movie's all right overall. But if you're somebody that really likes true crime documentaries or true crime anything, true crime shows, whatever, I think you'll really enjoy this movie. But like I said, just don't expect so much of a mockumentary. Like I said, you kind of get that in the beginning of it, and that's really a lot more behind the scenes stuff really for the rest of the movie leading up to the final act. And honestly, that's something that the marketing that that kind of threw me off of the marketing. The marketing made it seem like it was going to be a straight up mockumentary, like kind of like Strange Harvest was, or Lake Mungo or something like that, with these creepy elements added into it. But no, it's definitely more, like I said, the first 15, 20 minutes is definitely more the mockumentary style, and then it kind of goes into the all behind the scenes stuff. So just kind of maybe temper your expectations. But I think if you do like true crime, I would give this one a shot. Like I said, there are a lot of really cool things going for it. I champion the filmmakers 100% that they even got this made. So, there is a lot of cool stuff going for it. And like I said, the last final 15, 10 minutes are actually really creepy. So just know who you are going into it, but it's probably one that I would wait and check out at home. But thank you, everybody. That is my review for Hunting Matthew Nichols. If this is the review that you're finding me on, please come over to the channel and check out all my other 2026 reviews so far. I'd love to have you over here. And if you have seen this movie, please comment below and let me know what you thought about it. Also, if anybody that checks out this review is a big found footage person, please comment below and let me know some really good found footage movies. I've seen quite a few of them, and I've also seen quite a lot of bad ones. But please comment below and let me know what your favorite scary found footage movie is, or one that really messed you up or got to you and stuff like that. I'm always looking for more found footage movies, so please comment below and let me know. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. That way I can see all of you in the next one. Thank you so very much.